Emrin Louisi. Emrin, over to you.
Great. Thank you for the warm welcome and congratulations to you all for joining this fellowship. Greetings wherever you find yourself. Today, we aren't just talking about saving the planet as a hobby, we are talking about the operating manual for leadership in a world that is fundamentally changing. So, if you ever feel very clueless about climate change, think of it this way: the Earth is like a high tech greenhouse where thousands of years the glass has been kept and the temperature is very, very perfect. And now we have thickened this glass with carbon emissions, and the thermostat is broken. And our job as leaders isn't just to fix the thermostats, it's just to know how to run or figure out how to run a business, to run a city, or any other thing whilst the country, the room gets hotter and the temperature gets wilder. So today's session is going to move from the obsolete way of just talking about how science, how rays get into the atmosphere, all those stuff of things. It's gonna be like that. This is gonna be something that is gonna shape you in knowing how to run your city or your business amidst the climate crisis. So we'll move on and we'll get to know what the objectives are of this session, and then you can ask your questions later if they haven't been answered already. So, with my message to you, which is that climate change is one of the most important of issues of our generation and our future generations. And choosing how to respond to it requires both scientific knowledge and understanding our policy options. And our objectives, we'll be having about 7 objectives, which is understanding the concept of climate change, the shared socio-economic pathways, distinguishing between reinforcing positive loops that accelerate warming and balancing negative loops that stabilize systems. Would also be identifying where small shifts can produce transformative results. We would also be thinking about how to ensure that a shift to a greener economy does not collapse the social systems of vulnerable communities. That is also known as the just transition. And we would also overcome some cognitive biases. I'm sure some people, when they hear about climate change, all they think about is doom, because we have been preaching doom and gloom, but this is not what this particular program is about. So, for a climate session like this, the goal is not to talk about what is happening. This is about how to influence the system. And the session aims to bridge the gap between hard data and strategic action. So, if you want to know about what it is, we're going to talk about the operating constraints, about climate science. We're going to talk about the thresholds that actually dictates leadership agency. We talk about the earth system. We talk about carbon budgets and pathways. We're also going to talk about attribution science, the ability to link specific extreme events, which is critical for legal insurance and liability frame. Which this particular topic, I'm hoping that after you have gone through the entire process, you'd able to think widely and move beyond just, save the planet slogan to incorporating it into legal and business activities. And also we'll be dealing with the logic of change. So let's move on to the next topic, which is about understanding climate change. So, before you understand climate change, you have to think about what the weather is and what climate is. So, right now, the weather is how you feel right now, what it is. If you have a thermometer or we want to know what the weather is right now, from my end, 6 degrees, that is the weather. 6th May, 6 degrees at 4:12 p.m. And that is actually what the weather is. And when we talk about climate, we're talking about the long term patterns or the stats of the weather, which means that if we have to observe every year, set May for a number of decades, and we realize that, okay, so it's actually always about, let's say, 15 degrees to 20 degrees, then we know that this is the climate of this particular place where I am in. But then for some reason this year, which is very coincidental. This year it has changed. It's May and it's already 6 degrees, which usually isn't the case because this is not the month for winter. So this is the difference between climates, also the weather. So now let's go further and delve into how modern climate change means to us. So we have earth scientists, climate scientists, and experts who have been observing the environment, observing the climate for a very long time. So we have environmental histories where it takes about 150, sometimes it goes as high as 170 to 180, where they go on to study the weather patterns of a particular place. And from so many studies, we've realized that the Earth has actually warmed by 1.3 degrees Celsius. And this has been calculated over centuries. So every century, for let's say for the next 200 years, scientists are just observing how the weather patterns are, precipitation, and all of that. So they just observe it and then they move on to the next group of years, and that is where they're able to tell if there has been a change or if it is stable, or if there's even a change, what attributes these changes. And we have like um, natural causes of climate change. We also have the man-made, and this is what we are here for. So just some quick facts about climate change, and we move on to knowing which of the years were actually the warmest. So just 3 years ago, we experienced the warmest year on record, and that has been 2024, 2023, followed by 2026, 2016, as well as 2020. And we also have 2017 and 2022. And mind you, the global annual temperature is distributed across the globe, and it reveals that it's not really a uniform pattern. We are all not getting warm at the same time, and that the land also warmed more than the ocean. And this is because the ocean is able to absorb like a lot of heat. So the ocean is one of the water bodies, or oceans are one of the biggest reservoir of absorbing heat. And we also have the northern hemisphere as well as the southern. So when you look at the how the warming pattern is, the the northern hemisphere warmed way greater than the tropics or than the southern hemisphere. And we also have realized that, according to scientists with observations and facts, of course, 85% of the world's population lives on land in the northern hemisphere, meaning that they have experienced more warming in the past 150 years than the global average warming of the 1800s. Now, I want to draw, I know you're quite new here, but if you have some basic knowledge, I want to draw your attention to this word pattern about the 85% being warmer and having more people in there. So in the northern hemisphere, you realize that it's warmer over there and there are more people over there. And this also means that this is where civilized, I don't want to use the word civilization, I want to use industrialization started in there. So why is it not that? This is a question for you as we move on to the next cause, like to know the causes of climate change. Ask yourself right now, as you are getting the facts, to know that 85% of the world's population live on land and they live in the northern hemisphere. So in the north, they've experienced more warming than us. Industrialization has begun from there. Why do we have the place warming up more than in the tropics, when tropics are usually warm um, by nature? So this is just a food for thought. I hope that at the end of this session, someone would be able to give an explanation to this particular one. I don't want to have open that up now. So now let's just go to the simplest definition of climate change. So, climate change simply is the long term differences in the statistics of weather measured over multiple decade periods. So, we're talking about observing the climate or weather pattern of a particular place for a very long time, and then you realize that it has been a shift. There's a difference between what happened 200 years ago and what's happening now, or what happened 300, 100 years ago and what's happening within the last 100 years. So the causes of climate change include the energy balance. We also have the greenhouse effects, which has increased from human activity, hence the emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, aerosols, and halocarbons. So with the energy balance, it's simply put talking about the Earth's energy budget is running out. There's an imbalance. So there are a lot of rays come into the Earth's atmosphere and it's still like released back. It has to be bounced back into space. However, what is happening now is that there is an imbalance. So most of the gases are trapped in here instead of it's going back into outer space. So this is what is causing. This is one cause of the climate change crisis that we're experiencing now. And now we have the greenhouse effects. So I below the next slide shows how humans generate aerosols. So we have moved away from building mud houses and using thatch as dried grasses, and now there is industrialization. Societies have evolved from simple mechanisms to using engines, and now we have like a lot of big machines on our farms. We move from away from agriculture to manufacturing. So these are just like basic sociological aspects of how the system, the society used to be. First, people used to stay in their homes and just have their own gardens, manual stuff, and just engage in barter trade and all of that. But now there has been an evolution. People want to have bigger lands. We're not using more manpower. So now what we do is to build more gadgets, have more equipment, and hire less men to work on farms and produce stuff. So, for example, with the discovery of oil and gas, that's fossil fuels, it contains sulfur impurities, and these are burned and released into the atmosphere along with other products of combustion. So once these gases are in the atmosphere, they just react with other atmospheric constituents that are formed very small liquid droplets, and these ones are known as the sulfate aerosols. And we have other things, other aerosols that are produced by us, which is the black carbon. That is soot that we see from incomplete combustion. We also have the production of cement, and someone will be wondering, oil and gas is not the only industry that is the cause of climate change presently. We also have agriculture. So we have the plowing, we have all the heavy equipment. We also have the production of cement, which also causes climate change. So these changes actually interfere with certain areas that we see all across. And there are some examples on your screen that you can see in Central Asia as well as in the Western US. We also move on to natural processes that can affect climate change. So, with understanding climate change, I will be rushing a little bit because these are the basics, and we have like a long way to understand the policies, which is what is very important for you to understand now. So, you're going to have like two in ones in this session. We have the tectonic processes, the output of the sun, which is also more about the energy balance that we're talking about. We have variations and unforced variability, as well as the greenhouse gases that I explained earlier. So now let's move on to shared socioeconomic pathways. So, a group of scientists have come together to form a consortium, and they have predicted how with what what is going on, all the observation that they have seen. Um, they are now going to predict how the future will be like based on certain scenarios. Okay, so there are five pathways. Some in some climate literature, you're going to see as much as seven SSPs. So henceforth, I'm going to be calling shared social economic pathways as SSPs. So that it's a tongue twister, one, and two, that is what is used in this space. So whenever you talk about these pathways, these future predictions, you sound more like, yeah, you are an expert now. So with the SSPs, you can have as many as seven, but usually five are addressed, and even within the five, only four are addressed, talked about in climate literature. So with the SSP, that is more like the very ideal pathway that we seek to achieve. And it is a sustainable world where all the economies right now, everybody's talking about green and everything. And we are hoping that if our cries are finally heard and we are able to adjust to everything that is going on, well, we may be able to achieve the SSP1, which is going to be a more friendly environmental path. Now we move to SSP2. That is where we are now. Everyone is rushing. Everybody wants to have money. You could put in the comment section, tell yourself, do you really want to like save the planet, or you just want to um, get some money and feed everybody home? So the trend that we are following in this world is going to lead us to SSP. So that is where we are right now. And if we continue to move on to SSP2, we are going to develop an economic system where inequality gets worse, and it will be leading to increasing conflicts between regions. Already, people in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Egypt, people are already fighting over resources. Some time back in Ghana, there was a court case between the government of La Cote d'Ivoire as well as Ghana, where they had to fight over um, the sea or something, one of these resources. And so then, if we continue to say, okay, we want to move this way, want to move that way, China is going all the way out and blaming USA. US is also blaming China. So there's going to be, everyone's going to be, okay, I'm not going to go green. I'm just going to go all out. And then people in the global south will continue to get worse. And so that is SSP3. SSP4 would be about a world that is extremely, that has like inequality between countries. And this is often skipped when it comes to climate literature. It's skipped because already there isn't enough scientific data for experts to rely on. This is just a projection. And we have the SSP5, which is the opposite of SSP1. And it emphasizes economic growth, except that it's not about sustainability. It's just that people are getting like richer and richer over time. So we are moving on to what is happening and how we should move to influence the system. In my introduction, I did mention that we have to move from what is happening and forget about the doom and gloom story. Now, how are we going to influence the system to our benefits? So, as leaders, we are going to have this logic of change. So, you have to understand that climate change is a wicked problem where solutions in one area can cause crisis in another. So, if wherever you are finding yourself, let's say Nigeria wants to address the problem of climate change, if care is not taken well, it's gonna cause another problem in the neighboring country, maybe Benin or Togo or Cameroon or some other country. And so we talk about the linear system versus the systemic system. So we are shifting from cause to effect to interconnected loops. So we'll be distinguishing between reinforcing positive loops that accelerate warming and balancing negative loops. We also have the leverage points, which is based on the Nales medal framework, where we have to identify how shifting the mindset or a tax rule can produce transformative results. So we are also going to talk about the interconnectedness. So we talk about how climate intersects with biodiversity laws, food security, global inequality. So as a leader, you have to think about the energy, water, food nexus to avoid just like single solutions. And you'd also have to think about the leadership bridge where you have to act under uncertainty. So now we're talking about how science and systemic strategies come to play. So we're talking about scenario planning and forecasting. We have weather forecasters, we have the climate, we know how all these projections are going through. But now you have to just move away with what is happening now as leaders. You have to move away from predicting just a single future instead you have to focus on building resilience for multiple possible climates. So like the SSPs that we spoke about earlier, you have to project in that way, and not now it's not about just what weather forecast. We're still talking about the logic of change. We are also going to talk about the just transition, where you make sure that if you are shifting from one economy to another, it does not, collapse social systems or vulnerable communities. And we also have the adaptive management, that is a leadership style where you have to treat policies as experiments. So you can have time for you to allow a quick pivot. It's not like set cast in stone, because some findings have come out right now. The policy should be seen as something that is going to be an experiment, because we are still predicting. So now we're talking about the challenging mental models, that is the underlying assumptions that created the climate crisis. So the psychological and social systems. We talk about how ideas spread through social systems and how to reach the tipping point of public or corporation adoption. We also have to be mindful about the distance, thinking that climate change is far away from us and it's not true. Some people do not even believe in climate change. There is also the doomism, as I said earlier, that this session is not about me coming to cry foul, or the CSYP comes to cry like, oh my goodness, the world is coming to an end. That is not what this is about. So we have to, as climate leaders, if you're also going to talk about the climate problems, you are not supposed to project as a doom and gloom situation. It has to be about, what can I do? How do I influence policies? If I'm not able to influence policies, how do I take it up? So you have to end the systemic paralysis caused by fear. So moving still staying in here about this linear versus systemic thinking and changing about it, we're going to talk about structural leverage. So we have Danella Meadows' leverage points framework, and it's in the simplest point, it's about talking about this main theory that says that not all actions change a system equally. So there are small changes in deep places that can transform a whole system, and then we have some places that are very weak. And usually, as climate advocates, what we do is to talk about the weak, changing the weak stuff. I'm going to use a personal example about starting the advocacy. Everybody talks about, yes, tree planting, but moving away from tree planting, now there is the carbon markets, where we have to like plant trees, so we plant trees at certain places, and then obtain carbon credits. So me as a young advocate, I went on to advocate about it during Ghana's independence day. As I was advocating for climate education to be included in our syllabus some few years ago. At the same time, I designed placards saying that the carbon market is good and we should continue with the carbon credits. This is more like I'm not against carbon credits, by the way. I'm just giving an example. So this is more like a weak a weak place, or a shallow tipping point. I had opportunity to get into to be more like a consultant for this big firm that they are actually being blamed for climate change, and they want to do something right. So of course, I go to the Ghana's Forestry Commission. I try to liaise them to make them buy into planting thousands of trees, so that they can offset their carbon footprint and then get that kind of thing. So this is, according to the government, it's big, but then this is a very shallow way of doing stuff. But then they actually moved on gradually to have a very deep, powerful one of setting up projects that is actually going to help us know how to produce policies to address our gap. So it's not just about planting trees and then I just pay you and then you get your credits and I keep doing that. They want to understand how they can operate sustainably, and that is more like a very deep and powerful tool. That is the shallow leverage. So the shallow leverage was about the tree planting and other examples of shallow leverage or low impact moves are like taxes, target subsidies, or budgets and then limits, saying that okay, we'll do this, quotas and all of that. It doesn't, well, it does something small, but it's just like very shallow. It doesn't really like change something. Now we're talking about the structural change for something that is very like deep. So we're talking about the feedback loops, as I spoke about earlier. That is like more stronger. It has much impact. There is also making emissions data public. So now in Ghana we have the net zero carbon emissions project. So all these things are it's more deeper because it's gonna inform public decision. It's gonna have a structural change rather than maybe one company just going to build millions of trees somewhere and they still like offset the same amount of carbon. We also have the deep leverage. So that is still under accelerants and stabilizers. So the reinforcing loops, that is the snowball effect. We have the system goals, our beliefs, our mindsets. You know, we have to change our values. It's the hardest to change, but it's the most powerful and lasting. So imagine that the goal of the world now is about maximizing GDP to maximizing the well-being of people. Everybody will continue to produce whatever they have to do. We've seen so many videos on social media where we see that maybe Chinese industries are producing fake eggs. People are using so many GMOs. We are not eating a lot of food. There are so many diseases coming up now because our mindset, this is the deep leverage. When we talk about the positive loops, the mindset hasn't been changed yet. Because if everybody's talking about money, 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 I want our GDP to go up high. So whatever it is that we have to produce and then export, we are going to do that. But then when it changes, I don't know how we're going to change. Like for example, with I regret to mention his name, but US Trump comes to say drill baby drill. He's talking about his GDP, how his government or his country can go up high, and he's not thinking about the well-beings of other people. So if we have a change, this is still if you want to understand what the Donales Meadows framework is, this is what I'm still explaining. It's about changing our mindsets from well-being to planetary limits instead of having an increased GDP. So with the accelerants in climate science, feedback loops are often terrifying. Like the melting Arctic is reflecting less sunlight, is going to be all the volcanoes exploded and all of that. But then as leaders, we can trigger social reinforcing loops. So when the cost of renewables like drop, adoption rises, which drives down costs. So for example, everybody's talking about renewables. How many of us can afford EVs? How many of us can afford solar panels at home? I'm talking about having the huge solar panel that can be able to generate so much energy that you can charge your phones, you can be attending lectures like these, as you could be using your laptop and all of that. So what we want to do, that's the snowball effect, is that if more people continue to have all these join get into renewables, and let's say it starts from government and all of that, then everybody now begins to have this. Now buying a car is more almost basic, depending on where you are, which country you are from, and your GDP. Now buying a car is no longer like back in the days now, where a whole neighborhood we have just one or two people who are able to drive cars. Now we have so much cars that is now causes so much traffic, and you can buy on different either you buy at once or through the loan. So something like this has brought down the cost of cars. Now, if the car that was produced in say 2026, the value is not going to be the same, it's going to depreciate. So as leaders, if we're able to produce or trigger these social reinforcing loops, everything comes down, and that is a positive loop. And our job is to find out why the system is primed up to tip in a way um, that can help us instead of hurt us. So now let's move on to where to push, which I spoke about earlier about the intervening in a system. That's the Donnelly Meadows framework, as I spoke about, talking about which of the items or the actions that we're able to do, which produces a weak change, which has the intermediate change, and we also have the shallow change, that's the high change, that's the changing the mindsets, the intermediate to be something that is going to affect structural change. And when it comes to um, the low leverage, that's like changing numbers. So these are the these are the explanation to Daniela Meadows framework, which I explained earlier even before coming here because I was just talking out of passion. So now let's move on to the climate nexus, how to manage interconnectedness. So you cannot talk about climate without touching food, without touching water and equity. So let's say we plant a monoculture forest for carbon credits. It might destroy local biodiversity and water tables. You remember earlier as I was presenting, I spoke about how I was gonna land a carbon credit market project because I mean that was the trend. Should I say that was the trend then? Because to be fair, this is what most young climate leaders do. Instead of us thinking deeper, because we're first told about the gloom and doom and you want to like average. I was able to do that. And then we moved away from this shallow effect because planting just this monoculture for carbon credits is something that is going to be um, a shallow effect or a shallow driver instead of it having high impact according to the Meadows framework that we spoke about earlier, if you are following. So talking about just this monoculture forest, it's gonna disrupt a whole lot of stuff because a tree is not just about um it's not just a tree. It has it's a whole ecosystem. Apart from man I'm thinking about having to take wood or oxygen from it, all other organisms also thrive on it. And not every organism thrives under one particular type of tree. That is what the carbon credits are. So if you go on to do that instead of changing the structure, so with the example of for earlier going to plant trees instead of having a net zero carbon emissions project in some university that is going to inform government and then change our structure, that is what leadership is about. And then going for the carbon credits, monoculture trees is a failure of leadership. So a system that looks for just a system's leader, if you're looking at this, you're supposed to look for solutions that reduces emissions while it's simultaneously providing like public health or creating local jobs. So you have to like map out the ripples. You have to know that if I do this, it's going to affect A, B, C, D before you throw the stone. So um, we have to think about the unintended consequences, which is very, very important when you are going to be a leader or an advocate in the climate space. So we're now going to move on to scenarios and adaptation. So we have the forecast. We have the forecast versus the scenarios where we prepare for multiple futures. And just like the SSPs, which predicted something. So we have to, as leaders right now, if you have this particular information that we are going to have different types of futures depending on what we do, how are you going to prepare for it? So that is how it's going to be. Like we also have the adaptive management, which is learning by doing in real time, and we also have the building systems which can survive shocks. So the old leadership was about how to predict and control in a changing climate. But we can't predict perfectly. These are just projections. So instead, we have to use like the scenarios like the SSPs that we discussed earlier, and we have to stress test our strategies. We need to value resilience over efficiency. You have to have like a highly efficient supply chain that is very brittle and resilient. So that's when there is redundancy in one, you have to move to the other. So like climate leadership actually is about being robust, about being able to perform well across a wide range of possible futures. So with SSP still in mind. So we are still building on. You have to always keep in mind everything that we are learning per slide because it's built onto the other one. Now we are moving on to the just transition as one of our objectives for today. So a system is only as strong as it is most vulnerable. So if our climate policies leave workers to marginalized communities behind, the results will be a social backlash. Some in some parts of Europe, people don't even want to hear climate change or hear that, oh, you're an advocate. Like you have to kind of like run for your life or like not call yourself. You're not like the town savior because what most activists do is that they block the let me give you this scenario. Maybe you've been seeing you see that they all come up with very violent way of protesting and they can block like streets and now people cannot work. Let's say you are all the advocates or the activists. You've blocked the way maybe your the main road to the city central. You block it and you do not allow people to go to work because you are trying to send a message to the government to reduce the emissions. Let's talk about, let's say me, I'm your mother and I need to go to work. I need to fill up my hours. I need to pay bills. I've got loans. I've got housing. I've got rent. I've got heating. I've got food, clothes, all of these stuff. And now I cannot go to work because a group of climate change advocates or activists have blocked the way. And my boss, who's using the other way of the road, does not like really care. You did not come to work, and if they're the ones who protested, so all these things you have to think about it. This is just from the perspective of you as young advocates. Now let's move on to about not leaving people behind. So if policies leave workers behind, a just transition is not like just a moral goal. You have to make sure that everything is going on well. If any of your parents or if you happen to have anyone that you are dependent on in any of these industries that we are attacking, maybe in the cement production, in oil and gas, or in agriculture, some if you when you go to some parts of the Americas and Europe, people are even going against meat, farming meat or beef. They're against it as part of their climate change advocacy. You don't just take that because it's from the global north or something. In Ghana, the northern part of the region, they depend heavily. They have it's a dry place, it's at savannah, and they have a lot of meat. You can't go and say, okay, because I'm a climate advocate or a climate leadership, I'm going to stop like eating meat. Everybody should stop meat production. What happens to the farmers? What happens to the people who depend on these animals for hide, for artifacts, for clothing, for milk, for trade and all of that? What happens to that? So a just transition is not just a moral goal. We have to think about a systemic change, a necessity. So to change the system, you need to buy in the people in it, within it. So you don't do, this is what I want you to take on today. If you're talking about, if you ever think about the just transition, we don't do to people, we have to do with them. You have to, just transition is actually the framework that is used to ensure that the shift to a green economy does not leave the vulnerable behind. Let's say we want to talk about EVs, electric vehicles, and we ban it. How many of us can afford that? Okay, so now let's move on to how we are dealing with all of these situations. So I've addressed all of these problems under climate science, all of the nitty-gritties that you need to understand about the climate foundation. Now let's move on to adaptation to adaptation and mitigation. Let's look at how that is also going to influence us. So if you want to understand what it is to adapt or how we are going to mitigate, you have to distinguish between mitigation and adaptation. So you have to acknowledge that they are inseparable, they are interconnected. So mitigation is like a global public good. Okay, so we have like tons of carbon dioxide being removed in Nairobi. It benefits the whole planet. That is mitigation. Then adaptation, we come here, it's about intensely local, about protecting what is in a particular locality, in a specific coastline or crop. So now this is where the leadership gap often happens. Because as leaders, we focus on mitigation because it's easier to measure in carbon credits. And what you hear government saying, oh, we have done this. This government has been able to take away, reduce their emissions by, let's say, 2%, by 5%. And you, as a local person, you're trying to understand what it is. Because when it comes to the bigger stage, we're talking about statistics, about numbers, the evidence. But then we tend to neglect adaptation, where the cost of human life, that actually hits it. So a systemic change sounds great, but we have to try to avoid the unimaginable. So we have to adapt to manage the unavoidable. I'm going to explain to you in a very simple way, but then keep listening. So mitigation in the global south looks very different from than in the north. So it is about leapfrogging. So if you look at Vietnam, for example, they influenced this aggressive feed-in tariffs, and they became a global leader in the solar energy in just 2 years in Vietnam. And it's providing a very rapid energy transition, which is possible in an emerging economy. Now we have Costa Rica, which their national decarbonization plan is the gold standard. They are not just looking at energy, they are looking at the system, they are looking at land use, they're looking at the reverse decades of deforestation, trying to double their forest cover, and also like growing their economy. So they've proven that carbon sequestration through reforestation is viable, and people are trying. When I say people, I mean other countries are trying to adopt that. And this is a large scale mitigation framework, which actually also protects biodiversity. So, mitigation simply is addressing the root cause. And the root cause right now is that we said that we have like some gases that are trapped. Remember the story about climate change? We're in a high tech greenhouse, green tech house, and the thermostat is broken because like the temperature inside is too much. So it's about addressing the root cause, what causes climate change, that you stop the greenhouse gases from entering the atmosphere, and they've done that through the forest, and that is like equivalent to turning off a bathtub. Let's say the scenario about the climate change, the problem about climate change is a bathtub. Imagine you have a bathtub and there's water flowing. It has overflown and it's going off like on the floor. Mitigation is turning off that tap. That is mitigation. The cause of the overflow of the water is the tap being on. So now you turn it off. Mitigation is addressing the root cause. Now um, we'll just move on to adaptation. So we have other examples that you see in there. That is the decarbonization pathways, transitioning energy, transport, nature-based solutions, as well as ecosystems. So with Vietnam's solar surge and Costa Rica's decarbonization plan, that's what I spoke about earlier. We also have like, so with Vietnam, just a little background to it. A few years ago was heavily reliant on coal, and changing the laws to make it profitable for people to sell solar grid back then. So it added like a lot of solar capacity in 2 years than most developed nations would do in a decade. So they just like jumped, leapfrogged over the old dirty ways of doing things, and now they have moved on to solar. We also have the Costa Rica again, as they decided to stop looking at forest as just wood. They realized that forest is not just wood, it's not for furniture, it's not for fancy stuff in our homes or paper stuff. they realized that trees are like actually carbon vacuums. Trees, forests, I mentioned earlier that oceans are a good reservoir as well as forests. They're also like a carbon sink. They also absorb a lot of carbon. So they paid the farmers to have trees standing. So like the more trees that you have in your land or your territory, that is the more you get money. Because of that, they've been able to um, have their forest land. And with the topic of just transition, you have to make sure that vulnerable people are not affected. So you have a change. So how did they address the deforestation program problem that was in the country? They paid people to keep the forest up. If we come and say, oh, um, people are cutting off trees off their land because they want to build, because they need housing, or they need to have like a farm land or something, what happens to them? So now they have to pay them to keep them at. So that is actually about what mitigation is about, stopping the main cause of it. Now let's go back to our scenario about the tap. So let and the tap and also the green tech greenhouse we're talking about earlier. So even if we stop all the emissions today, greenhouse is already hot. Okay, if we stop everything, it's already hot. And now adaptation is about, now that it's very hot, how do we adjust our ways to live in this very hot place? So adaptation is about living safely in a new reality. If mitigation is turning off the tap, adaptation is getting a mop to clean the water that has been pouring, and also build a better drain that can, drain off this water. So some examples include the Great Green Wall in Africa across the Sahel, about 11 countries, Senegal, Mali, Eritrea, all those countries along the line. They are Mali, Djibouti, they're all a desert, and it's marching south. So it's eating up, the desert is actually eating up farmlands. So instead of just building like a wall of stone, 22 countries in Africa have come together to build like a wall of trees and plants. And this doesn't just stop the deserts from growing. It also brings water back to the soil. It creates jobs for millions. We have biodiversity saved. Um, Ghana also has this project which we have this project in Ghana, which has taken place in Keta and the Greater Accra region, because these are coastal lines and the sea is also eating up people's homes. So now they're trying to use a mix of gray and green. So that's like stone barriers and mangroves to try to protect the coast. And this is adapting or adaptation to change the physical world to protect people. So we have more examples about climate adaptation frameworks. That's the climate smart agriculture, securing food systems. I mentioned already about the the examples from Africa. So the highest level of climate leadership is about tripling the wind. So you have to have a double win. Remember the nexus. You have to find a solution that is going to create development that's also going to protect lives. So an example, for example, in Brazil, they have this urban planning framework, and it integrates like waste management and transport. There's also the Green Exchange Program. It allows the citizens to recycle their waste for fresh food. So it means that they are actually adapting and also giving some sort of livelihoods to the people. And to because of time, I'll just move quickly to our framework. That is the official UNFCCC and the key pillars. So now we're talking about when we talk about governance, like global governance, the whole thing about climate science right now is described as a region that is very, very complex. So there's a patchwork of institutions rather than one single government, one single world government. And its center is the UNFCCC. So that's the United Nations framework, you know, so that is the UNFCCC. We have that. It provides a legal bedrock where all countries, especially those that are members of the United States, United Nations, I beg your pardon. So that's like an architecture, and it relies on unique feedback On the feedback loop that we spoke about, it sort of provides science, which about 198 countries have to use to negotiate their policy during annual conferences, which is known as the COP, the Conference of the Parties. So, to give you a little bit of history, we did have the Kyoto to Paris, and the Kyoto largely failed. The protocol failed because it was too rigid and it only applied to like few countries. So now there was a new system where governments came together or parties came together, which is the Paris Agreement, and it's a hybrid model. It's a top-down approach in its goal. So you have to. The aim has been to give everybody. Remember, it's the legal bedrock. So now it gives you this framework that you have to all keep warming below 2 degrees. And this is very inclusive, but then it has a lot of discrepancies and all of that. It's not really perfect. So this is actually the greatest trend. But then there's a burden on ambition on governments and also national individuals. So the Kyoto Protocol was more like a binding agreement on countries where they have to make sure that they meet a target with, and it wasn't taking into consideration the economy of countries. We are all like different, so it's like that's why we, even when it comes to sports, we have women's sports under 18, under 20, we have the men's sports, we even have para Olympics where we have the specially abled people partaking in it. So this is what the Paris Agreement seeks to give. um, Under the UNFCCC, we have the IPCC, which gives the science. That's where the scientists are. And then we have the financial mechanism, which is the GCF. And we also have the loss and damage fund, which also talking about trying to find solutions for people who have been damaged by climate change and whatever, if they've lost lives and resources like land. So now let's move on to the implementation space. So yes, so when it comes to the polycentric governance, as we spoke earlier, the UNFCCC is more like the president of, yes, of climate change. You could put it that way. But we have other people that also include are also part of it, trying to give information or data for us to address this climate crisis. We have the global stock take. We have non-state actors. These are institutions that are not based on countries. They're also part of it. We also have our engineers and experts who use AI and satellites to monitor or verify national emissions in real time. And we also have fragmentation as strength. So fragmentation as strength is moving from a single UN-led focus to polycentric models where cities, businesses, and courts all act as governance hubs. So it's not just the UN that is now going to chair meetings or trying to find solutions for countries. There are other institutions. If you have been listening to the news, just last month, there has been another conference where parties or countries came in to talk about what wasn't discussed in last year's COP30. So now we move on to climate litigation. So under climate litigation, we have the rights-based 10, trying to target sovereigns and all of that. So to to wrap up, we have like climate leadership. We also have systems literacy. So the 5 pillars for you to rightly understand what climate leadership is about. You have to understand the systems literacy. You have to um, have scientific grounding, have adaptive resilience, the just governance, and also from commitments to implementation. And what you have to be in your course or your career is to be a systemic architect. So to wrap up, climate education or leadership isn't just being an expert in sorry, carbon dioxide molecules. It's about seeing the web. So you have to understand how your actions ripple out. You have to be honest with science, that's using the facts to guide your 10-year plan. And you have to also be just. So if you are going to make any decision, you'd have to make sure that as we change the world, we don't just leave the poorest people behind. So the clueless era, it's over. Now it's about systems. You have your tax to build something that lasts in a world is shifting under your feet. So you have to be very, very systemic and think about how to address change with the triple win effects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Emran. This has truly been an enlightening training. We've got to understand climate from the science perspective to the sociologist perspective, and how policy also intersects in this framework. I see that there are some questions coming in from our live stream and also in our chats. As mentioned, we have a structured way of collating your questions where there will be a Google form available so that you can make input ahead of the session. We also got some questions which have been shared with our facilitator and also formed part of the content of this particular presentation. I want to just head over straight to the chat just to see what people are curious to understand. But yes, if you're as excited as I am for the knowledge we have just gained, let's see some reactions. Let's see some more reactions. Yes, let's keep them coming. Great. So for our chat here, I do not see any specific question, but we are giving a minute or two so that we can get more responses, more questions, and then we would share with the facilitator. But Emran, before we move on to our next session, kindly share with us, maybe in a minute or two, how your journey has been in this space and some key takeaways for you.
All right. I'd say that in the beginning it was quite complex. Mind you, I'm not a science student. I just happened to land a job where I had to take over an entire department and going into so many rooms. I was wondering why something as critical as climate change wasn't made simpler and wasn't bringing incorporating like everyone. Why was it just a secluded people? Why must there be um, I don't want to use the word elite, but why must it be some members club only, kind of thing? So that was how I personally told myself that if we have to solve this crisis, because I just observed the frustrations of our experts, and I'm like, okay, you do all the sciences, but then there's a larger group of people where these they don't know anything about what you're talking about, but they feel it. So how are you able to include them to make them understand what you have found, and also make them help you and not build resistance to all of these stuff? So that has been my journey, and now I just try to disseminate climate change or climate change education as much as possible. And that has led me into climate education, trying to start from grassroots levels, from as low as 3 4 years, trying to explain to them what the environment actually is, moving to high schools, moving to vulnerable people, the victims of climate change. So that has been it. I have just also realized that joining so many of these fellowships have also empowered me in a way, in a wrong way, or in a no, I wouldn't say in a wrong way. But then earlier when it comes to joining fellowships, it's always been about gloom and doom, and that is not how we are supposed to address climate change. We are supposed to address it in a way that would make people know how to run cities, how to run businesses. And personally, I think that I'm behind. If I had a different way of whoever was teaching me about climate change, all these certifications, models, and all of this stuff that we are going through, if they had projected it as an opportunity, as a with something that we could not escape and we have to live with, it would have helped most of us. So you realize that many people are now moving away from looking at the problem. And my wish to everyone here is to look at it as a business model and not just, oh my goodness, the world is coming to an end. That is how it has been shaped over time.
Thank you so much for that, Emrin. Truly impressive to hear, and it's great the impact you're making. From our live chat, there are no questions, rather very thoughtful comments. I see people saying that this has been a great session. I'm gaining so much from this session. My time is worth being on this session. Great presentation. This is what we wanted, and they tagged the organizers on this. So thank you so much, Emrin. If there are any more questions, we would share it, and then the feedback will be shared with participants via WhatsApp channel, just as we do with our communication. So yes, thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you too. So, ladies, gentlemen, all persons on the call, we are moving to part two of today's session. Yes, we intend to ensure that they are very packed with information, knowledge to help shape the journey you are about to embark on. Today, our second session focuses on leadership. And without wasting much time, allow me to introduce our speaker for the session. He is the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Partner of the All Encompassing Global Consult. He is in the person of Jesu Bamige Daniel Fadepe, who is globally recognized. He is an institutional architect and system strategist leading AAGC and the Talent Incubation Hub. With a resounding applause, yes, silence, but using our reactions, let's welcome him on the call.
Oh, thank you very much, Alvin, and good afternoon, good day, everyone. I'm speaking from Nigeria at this very moment in time, widely traveled. So I will say good day, everyone, and welcome to session one of the Climate Skill for Youth Program 2026. I'm excited about what is ahead of us. I'm excited to see a bunch of young people being climate conscious. It's not just the learning about, what is climate and what is climate change. It's also about preparing ourselves and nurturing ourselves in a way that's, yes, everything we need to sit on those tables where discussions and decisions are made, we are fully equipped with these things. So let me begin by reframing something very important. Climate change is often presented as an environmental issue. The former speaker highlighted this quite well. But in reality, it is far deeper than that. It is a leadership problem. It is a system problem. It is a coordination problem. Across the world, we have solutions. We have a lot of researchers working day and night trying to find solutions to this problem. We do have funding to solve some of this problem, and we have innovative ideas coming through. We have innovation. But what determines whether these solutions actually work is leadership. This session is about preparing you to become the leadership. So when we examine climate challenges globally, a pattern becomes clear. Policies exist, but they are poorly implemented. Wow, a lot of young ones are not involved in the development of the policies and also in the implementation. Funding do exist, like I said earlier on, but it is misaligned. And innovation exists, but it is fragmented. So what are we looking to do here? The issue is not knowledge. The issue is execution. And execution is driven by leadership. This means that the real gap we are solving in this program is not awareness. It is leadership. The world we live in now, a lot of young people are fully aware of what is going on. But do they have the capacity to sit in meetings, discussions, podiums to ensure that the necessary conversations are held? And this is why we introduced this to this program. Now let's begin. Let's bring this directly to each and everyone on this call. You're not here just to learn climate concepts. You are not here just to attend sessions. You are not here. You are here to one transform. You are the hero of tomorrow when it comes to the systems that we need to build. A system aware, solution driven climate leader. That's who we want you to be. And we want to bring this to your consciousness. What does this mean? It means you will think differently, you will act differently, and most importantly, you would execute differently. These are where the gaps are right now. And this program is not theoretical, it is transformational. So, climate does not exist in isolation. It intersects with energy systems, the agriculture, as the previous speaker has rightly mentioned, finance, governance, technology, and society itself. This means that no climate problem exists alone. We know this. Every issue is connected to multiple systems. So if you try to solve a climate problem in isolation, you fail. It's very, very simple. Leadership begins with understanding the full system. And I want to applaud the previous speaker for, going around, just making sure that we have that foundational knowledge when it comes to climate and climate change. So a true climate leader must develop what we call systems thinking. What does this mean? Understanding interconnections, recognizing feedback loops, anticipating long-term consequences, and aligning multiple stakeholders. You are not solving a single issue. Climate change is not a single issue. You are navigating a network of cause and effects. What is the cause? What is the effect? What are the actions that we need to take? What are the conversations that we need to have? This is what distinguishes a leader from just a participant when we're talking about climate change. So let's take a simple example, deforestation. Most people see it as, tree loss, people cutting down trees and not planting more trees. But in reality, it affects carbon emissions, food systems, livelihood, and national economic output. So if you only plant trees, you have not solved the problem. You must address the policy that guides climate change when it comes to planting trees. You must address the economics. You must address the community behavior and also enforcement. So people know there are consequences for actions that can lead into negative climate effect for everyone. That coordination is what we call leadership. Climate decisions also happen across multiple levels. At the global level, through the UN and the COP agreements, at the regional level, through bodies like the African Union, at the national level, through governments and policies, and at the local level, through communities and the grassroots actors, which is each and every one of us on this very call. Leadership is the ability to then navigate all of these levels, not just understand them, but know how to navigate them, and navigation for influence. Young people today are no longer observers. We know this. That's why we can see, obviously, the number of responses we've gotten on the Climate Skills Program 2026. The young ones are no longer observers. They are innovators. They are advocates. They are policy contributors, community mobilizers. So we need to ensure that the place of leadership is also integrated in all of this, because that's what they make it all encompassing. We also know that impact requires more than passion. It requires a structure, it requires strategy, it requires credibility. And this program is designed to give you that structure. The session is built on 3 core pillars of the Talent Incubation Hub. We introduced the Talent Incubation Hub because we understand the place of leadership. We want a future of young people that will be able to stand in meetings, in podiums, conferences, to be able to strategically shape some of these decisions. The previous speaker spoke about activists, somebody going on the streets trying to block the road. There are a million and one ways to be able to do these things if we understand the place of leadership, the place of communication, the charisma, influence, and all of this. And what we've done with the Talent Incubation Hub initiative is we've been able to build this in a structured, self-paced learning where you can go at your own pace and learn the ABC, the 1, 2, 3 of leadership. And for this program, Climate Skills for You 2026, we've been able to map 3 different pillars that we know is core to the success of the young ones when it comes to climate skills and leadership. Pillar 1, executive and leadership development. Pillar 7, governance and institutional transformation. And the 6th pillar, which is the innovation and research, which we know together this pillar produces leaders who can think clearly, influence effectively, and execute at scale. This is not theory, it is a transformation framework. Leadership is not only dimensional, you must develop multiple leadership capacities. Visionary leadership to define the direction of things, collaborative leadership to build partnerships that will make those decisions and those actions to be very, very potent across the globe, and adaptative leadership to respond to change. Just like the previous speaker said, you have to understand the place of adaptative leadership in the place of climate change. It helps you to be able to respond to these climate changes. System leadership to align ecosystem. The most effective leaders combine all of these 4 leadership. No climate solution is implemented alone. Every solution requires governments, the private sector, communities, and global partners. Your role is to align these interests, to negotiate outcomes, and to drive implementation. That is how real impact happens in the place of climate change and leadership. Leadership without ethics is dangerous. Leadership without ethics is dangerous. It leads to failed projects, loss of trust, and wasted resources. For example, when you decide to go and disrupt every single activity, not remembering the fact that there might be a pregnant woman that needs to get to the hospital very quickly, you block the road, there might be an emergency that requires somebody's life to be saved at a very short period of time. And all of these is just because the ethics and the accountability when it comes to leadership and climate change has not been embedded in our subconsciousness. A true leader operates with transparency, accountability, and inclusion. You think inclusively, and this is what sustains impact over time. Now, let us bring everything together. Your role in this program is defined across 3 key pillars. You would develop system thinking, decision making, and execution capacity. You would also understand how policy work and how to engage institutions effectively. And you would also learn how to develop real research-backed solutions. The previous speaker mentioned not seeing climate change as a disaster, but seeing climate change as an opportunity to make a difference, an opportunity to come up with something completely new that would be a solution to the world that we want to live in tomorrow. Together, all of these means you are not just learning, you are preparing to lead. It is not just about climate change and the awareness. It's the leadership that connects with it, that will allow you to sit in podiums, that will allow you to be able to influence decisions, and that will allow you to be able to execute within real systems. And also, It will allow you to know how to navigate the terrain of asking for the necessary support from developmental partners, from the government, from your local community, people that you live with. And that would then give what we call an all encompassed success. So the climate transition will not be driven by awareness alone. We don't want to re-overemphasize this. It requires structured thinkers, disciplined leaders, system builders, and solution executors. This is the standard you are being prepared for. And this is the expectation moving forward. There will be a lot of activities, there will be a lot of assignments, there will be a lot of information that will be pushed out to this community. The climate skills youth program 2026. It's not just the 4 weeks event, the onboarding, the week one, the week two, the week three. It is what happens after. And I can tell you, one of the things that we've done is we've started engagement with key decision makers, at international level to be able to look at local region. And let's see those that have the capacity, those that sit in those offices, and they can then be able to map opportunities that would allow the young ones to take the place of leadership. The future of climate action depends on leaders who can understand the complexity around it, navigate the systems, build solutions, and deliver results. That journey starts here, and it starts with you. And that will be the end of my presentation today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Together, we can make the world a much better place for us to live in, not to disrupt the government activities or the activities of our leaders, but to shape decisions in a way that the future belongs to us and we have a livable world to live in. Thank you very much. And over to you, Alvin. Thank you. Good day, everyone.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That was succinct and it was great. And I can see the comments in the live stream are really encouraging, indicating that people resonate with your submission. I've also seen people's take on leadership, and it's great because this space is a space for dialogue and co-creating outcomes together. I've seen that there are some questions in the Q&A section for our previous speaker. I want to just quickly read them out so that she can attempt them. And for you, Daniel would also share the questions that have come towards your presentation on leadership. Hi, Emran, if you're ready, please let me know so that I can proceed with the questions.
Yes, I am. I got
Great.
a couple
So
of
we have
questions
a
here.
few questions. Let me just start reading them. So the first question is, considering the carbon credit wagon around Africa, do you think the framework being used is in accordance to science? Furthermore, do you also think it has a tangible effect or impact on mitigation of climate change?
Okay, before you move on to the next one, could you let the person asking which framework they are talking about? I
Okay,
didn't get that well.
that's great. So this question came from Muanwa. If you can share in the chat the framework you are referring to, it will be great for us all. So while we wait for that response, the second question is, how is it almost every country, when the conversation of climate change happens, we mostly speak about carbon? And how do we change that in rooms talking about climate?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So when we talk about carbon, I mean, climate change is all about, remember, as I said, that we are using the world as a great tech house where we have some gases coming in and then also get it out. So take it this way, you cannot talk about climate change without carbon. All right. So these are part of the causes of climate change. So it's getting hot and we don't know what to do about it. So you cannot talk about climate change without carbon because we're talking about the energy balance where we have the sun radiating into our atmosphere and it has to also go bounce back. But because there is an imbalance, let's say like for you to understand it in a very simpler form, the earth has a budget of balance. There's a goal, there's a given and there's a taken. But then what we have received, that's the radiation, all the rays and the radiation and the gases and everything that we receive, we have to bounce a part of it into outer space. But if we are not able to bounce that up and it traps in there, then there is so many like emissions. There are so many halocarbons, the aerosols, all these pollutants that are in here that is actually causing that. So the reason we are actually talking about climate change is all about carbon. So that is actually the main stuff. And for your homework, I want you to go back. I don't know if the slides will be given back to you, but I don't think that the slides are very without prior knowledge, I don't think you'd really understand the slides. But at the end of the slides, I gave in some references where you can go read on these authors and get more understanding. But you can't talk about climate change without carbon. I hope I made this clear to you.
Yes, thank you so much for
Okay.
that, Emrin. And the link to the slides will be shared for all participants. I know it has already been shared in the chat earlier, but it will still be reshared so everyone has access to it. So a response has come with regard to the framework being
Okay.
referred to, and the framework is Article 6. And I want to take it from that is from Article 6 of the Paris Agreement.
Okay. So what is the
So
question about Article 6?
yes, considering the carbon credit wagon around Africa, do you think frameworks being used is in accordance to signed? Furthermore, do you also think it has a tangible effect or impact on mitigation of climate change?
Okay. Is there any other question too? So we take it all at once. Any other? Or that's all?
There is another question.
Okay.
I'd like to know how carbon emissions are determined from trees and how would I integrate this in my leadership role to aware my community?
How are carbon emissions?
How are carbon emissions determined from
Okay.
trees? And
Okay.
how would I integrate this in my leadership role to inform my community?
Okay.
And there is another question. Who do you consider the most impactful climate leader of the past decade and why? An interesting take here. But for all of you joining, if all your questions are not answered here, as mentioned, we would share them with the facilitators. They would revert with their responses, and we would share that with you as a resource to read.
Okay. So let's take these are the only questions. So I can go ahead and then answer them. Hello, Alvin. Do I go ahead?
Yes, you
Can you
can.
hear
You
me?
can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So, in relation to the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, it's actually directly tied to mitigation because the agreement is a common mechanism for the countries to cooperate in reducing GHG, that's the greenhouse gas emissions, more efficiently. So, what the Article 6 does is that countries can treat like emission reductions, that is called the ITMOs, that is the internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. So, they have to meet their climate targets. We also have the Sustainable Development Mechanism that is also under Article 6. So it's like a supervised system where we have the projects like maybe renewable energy or reforestation to generate carbon credits. And we also have like non market approaches. So what actually this Article 6 does for mitigation, why it matters for mitigation is that it is flexible. So I think I forgot to mention or talk about the NDCs and also the NAPs. So under the UNFCCC, that's the governing body for all of these climate stuff. Imagine that that is the president of this green tech greenhouse that we are in. Every country's been charged to come up with certain targets that they can meet, and these ones are known as the nationally determined contributions. So these are known as NDCs, where countries must say, okay, this year I'm gonna reduce emissions by 5%. That is my target. Another country is gonna say, oh, I'm gonna increase renewable energy, something like that. Another country is gonna say, oh, I'm gonna have an increase in green jobs. So something like that. You're going to have everybody having their nationally determined contribution because it's related to them. That is something that they are going to contribute to make sure that the overall temperature that we are trying to get to is to make sure that we are below 2 degrees Celsius. So now we have the National Adaptation Plans, NAP. These are more like local stuff. Remember what mitigation is about. Mitigation is about turning off the tap, that is cutting off greenhouse or emissions, and then adaptation is about looking for a mop to dry the water that has spilled over the bathtub, or if it is just too much, try to find some drainage for it to drain. So all these things are all part of it. So the Article 6 actually provides efficiency. It also gives some kind of integrity and a way of scaling up. So that is how um, Article 6 actually is directly related to mitigation. However, we have like challenges because there's a risk of greenwashing. So some people that we don't really monitor so much of the carbon markets, they can claim that, oh, we've reduced about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. But when you come to their country, it's just full of pollution. There's also developing nations also emphasize, as you said, like in Africa, we also must deliver like real benefits to sustainable development. We don't even have food to eat yet, and now we have to now think about solar panels. So there are really like some nuances. It's not really like all perfect. If not, we would have already solved the problem. We're just trying to tweak it here and there. So see the climate system, like I said earlier in the presentation, that policies are more like experiments. It's not so that you can adjust and tweak in wherever it fits. It's not something that says that, oh yes, this is how it's supposed to be. So that's how you're supposed to treat the climate system and also the policies. Just that if you want to make some improvements, you have to make sure you have a triple win. That is making sure that you reduce the emissions, you create you save lives or create jobs, and also improve have like social development all throughout. So that is what the Article 6 is all about. So the next question was about how carbon emissions are determined from trees. That's a very interesting question. So carbon emissions from trees are actually determined by looking about how much carbon they can store and how much they can release under different conditions. So through photosynthesis, we know that trees absorb carbon dioxide and then they give us oxygen. And so they store it in their trunks, they store it in their branches, their leaves, and their roots. So this carbon store, that's what we call the biomass carbon. And so forests actually act as a sink because they can hold very large amounts of carbon dioxide. If not, it will just like, warm the planet. So there are several ways of measuring like emissions. So we have the um, biomass estimation. I think I'll leave this to the scientists. We also have like something called a carbon content where they think about how half of a dry wood mass, the wood of dry wood, the mass of dry wood is just carbon. So you have to multiply biomass by this fraction to estimate the carbon that is actually stored. And we also have like now we have technology, engineering, we have remote sensing and satellites that can track forests. like forests and carbon sinks from the ground. So more we have healthy forests, it means that there are carbon sinks and they're actually absorbing more carbon dioxide. And then we also have like deforestation. So if you keep cutting the trees, they I mean they die. They're actually also releasing the gas. So that is how deforestation actually causes all of these emissions. Not just about it being cut in the sunlight or the sun rays dropping to dry off the moisture. Also, when they die, they also like release this carbon because they're already storing carbon within them. So I think in short, yes, carbon dioxide. When they are alive, when trees are alive, they actually absorb the carbons, and when they are cut or they are burnt, then the carbon that is stored within them has just been released as emissions. I hope that this answers your question. The third question was which climate leader is
Yeah, in the
most
past decade,
inspiring
which
the
climate leader has been the most inspiring for you and why?
Okay, so this is gonna be quite funny because every fellowship that you attend or every training that you go through, people leave marks whether you know it or not. There are certain things in the climate story that I would actually like leave out because maybe whoever trained me left it out. For example, I went through the climate reality leader by the ex vice president of the US, Al Gore, where he trained us. I do not even consider like artificial um, carbon sinks. I don't consider that just because of that influence. But if I want to talk about one person, it's gonna be I hope I've not forgot her name. Her name is Temi Lade. She's known as the Global Temi. Yeah, she is one person who has inspired me so much. Not even because of what she told me about, but it's more about how she takes on the trajectory of looking at the climate story. Because in Africa, I know we have so many people, but if you're from the global south, you realize that it's all about gloom and doom. She's one person who has inspired me, and I see hope when I hear climate change instead of despair. So that's just about it. Is that all for today?
Yes, so there are a lot more questions, but what we will do is that we will share them with you and then get them as a
Okay.
resource in writing and share with all participants. Else, we risk staying here longer than
Yeah.
estimated to answer the many, many questions we have. So thank you so much, Emrin. It was great hearing from you, and we know that we'll still get to connect with you and interact with you. For all of you joining the call, Emrin Luisi is the founder of the climate sociologist. She is a distinguished climate leader whose footprints are seen beyond our continent, Africa. Her social media details will also be shared once you see the post out live, and then you can engage with her, follow, and also get to know what she's been up to. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, all the best leaders.
Thank you. Ambassador Daniel, we have a lot of questions for you as well, but from this pool, we'll take two, and just as Emrin will do the responses, the questions will be shared with you, and we get them as a written resource for participants. So the first question, Daniel, is what does effective climate leadership look like for young people without formal positions or platforms? And how can digital tools or online platforms be used to amplify their impact? And for one question, I see many, many questions in there. But if you are ready, I could share all two and you attempt, or you take one at a time.
Yeah, I think we should share all the questions. Thank you, Alvin. Let's have all the
Okay.
questions. I think we're taking just two. Let's have both, then we can
Yes.
then
So the second
address them.
question is what leadership skills and strategies are most important for young people who want to influence climate policy, mobilize communities, and drive climate action despite limited resources and political barriers?
Okay,
Should I take them
thank you.
again or you are
No,
fine?
that's no, that's no, that's fine. That's fine. I think there's something here that is connecting both questions. limited resources, and the fact that these are young people. And interestingly, one of the conversations we've been having with developmental partners, with MAP stakeholders, as far as the Climate Youth Program 2026 is concerned, is centered around this sort of presumed limitation. But let's leave that on the side for a second. The starting point for a future leader is to be self-equipped with the necessary skills that you need, the charisma, the knowledge, the ABC of leadership. Honesty, transparency, accountability, inclusive thinking, system thinking, not thinking in isolation. Oh, yes, there is an incident, and I just have to think about myself. I just have to think about my immediate community alone. I'm not looking at the bigger picture. So those are the basics. Those are the one, two, three, the ABC, and that's the reason why we put together the executive leadership course as part of the Talent Incubation Hub initiative, which would help a future leader to be fully equipped. In fact, the feedback that we've gotten so far from that very pillar is excellent. And that's the reason why we decided to have conversations around giving access to every single person that is interested in going on the leadership journey to have access to this pillar under the Talent Incubation Hub initiative. So that would really help. Now, once you're equipped, you're fully equipped, you know the ABC, the one, two, three, of the leadership journey, then you would then see that, being part of programs like this will open up opportunities for you to then engage with local leaders that would give you the opportunity, that would could it be a day life in what they do, just to have an experience of what they do? Could it be a seminar? Could it be a symposium? Could it be, youth forum at United Nations level? For example, UNESCO Youth Forum last year, we have people on this call that represented their countries. So when you then have those opportunities, one, you're prepared. Two, from that preparation and engaging with leaders, you are already, within the radar. We can tell those that are serious about this. You won't miss out opportunities, and when those opportunity then comes, you will be in a position to deliver effectively. uh, so let's look at the digital tool. That's another thing about the world of now. Everybody has Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, etc. What do we use this tool for? Are we aware of the power we have as individuals to influence decisions, to influence policies? We don't necessarily need to be in a very high dignified government role. We have access to social media. You see something going wrong, you don't close your eyes to it. That is something you can use constructively. And when it comes to climate change and awareness, it is not just we have people that are on this program, they have friends that they know will be, they will benefit from this sort of program. They've not even informed them about it. So it starts with the little things you can do with the power of your digital tools that you have. The social media is there. Awareness. You can start writing, those that love to write, you can start writing articles around what is happening in your immediate environment. You can start, recording some of these projects that you embark on. As small as planting a tree, as low as writing information or giving information about carbon emissions. And why are people talking about these carbon emissions? The fact that these carbon emissions, the human caused carbon emissions, are trapping heat, leading to severe risk, for the ecosystem, for human health, and for the economy. These are little things that a lot of people don't know. What is the part that I play as an individual? And again, when we tie this all in the world of leadership, you're thinking about the core: honesty, transparency. You have to be honest with the reality on ground. You have to be transparent when you are reporting these things. No bias. You have to be have the charisma to be able to communicate in a way that people will listen, and people would see that you have a lot to put to the table. So these are the ways that we can start making a change from our own immediate world, and a change that would then influence the world at large. It starts with you. It starts with me. It is not, a particular defined organization or an institution that can start making these changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Daniel. And yes, there you have it. Your questions, some have been answered here. And for others which haven't been answered, as we have stated, we will put them together, share with our facilitators, and revert to you on the WhatsApp page with their responses. That way, you still have all your answers met with questions. I want to acknowledge our online participants, those joining us from YouTube, for making time to stream, to join in today's conversation, today's discussion. And as much as this is a training program, we value this as a co-creation activity where we have dialogues and conversations together. Special thanks to our speakers for making time on their busy schedules to join today's session to facilitate and set the tone for our upcoming trainings. Next week at 2 p.m. UTC, we have another session, another interesting session. So do well to tune in early and join in the conversation. For those who asked about the slides and the attendance link, it has been shared in the chat. It would also be updated in the description for the YouTube live stream. And for those who are also on the YouTube, you can just scan the QR code there, get access to the confirmation form. All information will still be shared on our WhatsApp channel as our main channel of communication. And yeah, we will keep the conversations ongoing. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening till we meet again next week. It's bye from us.